Hello, everyone. It's me, Kirsten. Welcome to the It's Giving Mystical podcast. This is your podcast for the week of March 7th, officially fully here in March. March is always Empress energy number 3, the energy of abundance, creation. You can feel it every year, and you're like, what? Spring comes, and you can feel the earth shifting gears. You can feel the potential energy as it's about to become reality, as it's about to become transformation. It goes back to that conversation about the void, the darkness, the quiet. It's not a place of emptiness, it's a place of bubbling potential. And in the springtime, you can feel the dial turn and this sense of, especially here in the Northeast, right? You can feel this sense of the world is beginning again. The world is taking all of that creative energy, that potential, that thought, that bubbling cauldron of creation, and it's getting ready to produce the gifts of that, the manifestations of that, the abundance of that. So, Empress is an important feminine archetype, and it's an important energy in the tarot, and it's an important one to get to know in your own body. When you think about tarot from a Jungian perspective and you really begin to investigate tarot as an exploration into the archetypes, what you notice is that most of us, given our culture and given our upbringing, are given a very narrow band within which to operate. You are these 5 things. You are not these 5 other things. And we begin to identify more with certain energies than others. One of the beauties of the tarot is that when you take a card like Empress, you could study the Empress, you could investigate the Empress, you could be in dialogue with the Empress for a year and not get bored. There's something really interesting and exciting about taking the feminine archetypes, in my case, but really all the archetypes, all of the energies present, all 78 gifts, and spending time understanding how they impact your nervous system. How do they interact with the stories you tell about what's possible, about who you are, about what the world is like? And the Empress is a good one. The Empress is an interesting one because like I was saying in Jungian archetypal work, there's a sense in your mind of the archetypal, the perfect, the ideal, the imaginary table, right? So it's like, okay, there's the sense of table. And it might take on lots of different shapes, but you're kind of comparing all things to this idea of table. And that's a good neutral one. But when I begin to introduce the idea of Empress, the idea of mother, the idea of virgin, the idea of priestess, all of a sudden it's not so neutral, is it? Mother's a great example. The Empress, where is she in relation to your body? Like, are you fully embodied in your Empress energy? Is that something that's for other women, other people? Is that something that exists far away from you? Is it something that exists close to you? It's such an interesting investigation. And mostly it's interesting because it helps us access more of ourselves. And that will be, like, put it on my tombstone. Like, my dream, my purpose, my calling is, can I help myself and other women in particular expand what's possible in their own nervous system, expand the space they're allowed to take up, the energies they're allowed to work with, the woman they're allowed to become. Like, that really matters to me. That's really exciting to me. And so the Empress always feels like the beginning of the year. High Priestess, we have our own investigation with her, and she's lovely too. But the Empress, there's an exuberance to her that kind of begs for you to play with her. The Priestess, High Priestess kind of begs for you to get quiet with her. The Empress is like, no, 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 come out into the woods with me. Let's get weird. And I love that energy. So wherever the Empress lives for you, whatever she's like for you, how is she different than Queen energy, right? How is she the same or different than Queen energy? How is that the same or different than Sovereign energy? So there's just like a lot of things to play with in this. And then you add the 9 year and you bring us to Hangman. So we had a little bit of a Hangman flavor taste last month, but that's going to be with us. How does reversal and abundance, what do those two things mean when they come together? What does it mean for your perspective to shift around creation? Like, we take these two cards and we ask them to dialogue with each other, and then we dialogue with them. And we investigate, we get curious, we explore what opens up. So that's just something to offer you in the beginning of this month. I hope you take it. I hope you play with it. Choose the word that comes to you when you sit with the Empress card, and then choose the word that comes to you when you sit with the Hangman card, and then journal and play and like cross reference and let them investigate and inform and activate each other and see where that takes you. I can't say enough about this idea of watching what the world is bringing to you. I said to you guys last week, I was thinking about this idea of momentum. It's really on my heart and in my mind. There's something that my soul, my spirit, my energy is trying to work out in this realm of momentum. I'm doing some interesting shadow work discovery, mostly to help inform my teachings. The word that came up was telos, which is the Greek word for trajectory, right? It's the direction. It's where are we headed? And then I picked up this book, Atomic Habits. Maybe you guys have read it. It was one of those books, I'm so judgy that I was like, that's a kind of a silly business book. But for some reason, I was called to open it up and look at it. And I was like, oh, yeah, I needed to hear this. And he talks so much about how your daily habits add up to a trajectory. Like you are building the future you by the choices you're making today. So in my world, it's like, okay, momentum, Empress energy, springtime, telos, trajectory. What am I trying to like work out about movement? And where is that happening in your life? Like maybe you're with me, maybe we're all on this momentum and trajectory riff, right? But maybe it's different. And I invite you to open up your awareness to what keeps showing up. Like, what are the key words? What are the concepts? What are the phrases that are just kind of bubbling up in my field that the world keeps bringing into my awareness, into my attention? And what do they want from me? What would they have of me? Right? There's something really interesting about that co-creative energy, that the way momentum, when you start to get curious about certain things, how the answers come maybe in unexpected packages, but the answers always come. I want to remind you of that and give you permission to hear them, even if they come in ways that you didn't see coming. Okay, so where are we? The Four of Pentacles last week was really about holding yourself in, holding your resources, holding your boundaries, holding yourself together, and making really informed, intentional choices and noticing where your resources and your values were aligned or whether they were maybe out of harmony. And just sitting with that, being with that, investigating that, being curious about that. The card I pulled for us this week is the Five of Wands. That's a really pretty abrupt shift in energy. So I'll say to you, the Five of Wands, Wands energy, right? Your fire, your creativity, your inspiration, your excitement, your passion, your sexuality, like all the get up and go, all your little inner fire momentum, all the part of you that wants to shine, that wants to warm up the world, that wants to engage, that wants to be alive, like this real craving and focus on the part of me that is just so interested in living, so interested in being alive, so interested in what I can do and what I can shape and where I can show up and what I can become. The five is challenge, conflict, change. And one of the interesting things about the Five of Wands, the Five of Wands is probably the most gentle of the five cards. The Five of Cups has to do with grief. It's a very difficult card. The Five of Pentacles has to do with worthiness, where we put ourselves outside of the light, where we think that we are unworthy, where we wonder about abandonment. The Five of Swords is the card of not quite treachery, but unkindness, the victim complex, the victim mentality, the triangle of disempowerment. All three of those are difficult when they show up. Five, as it shows up in the minor arcana, is difficult energy. It's part of the struggle, right? Five could be identified with struggle as much as it's identified with liberation and freedom. Again, like how do those things go together? What do those things have to do with each other? But the Five of Wands is the most gentle of the fives. And the Five of Wands, the most important lesson in this card is not to take things so seriously. So when the Five of Wands comes up, notice the things in your life that feel life or death. Notice the things in your life that feel like, I will never survive this. Notice the things in your life that feel like a real challenge to who you are, to your safety, to your security, to your sense of self, to your own spark. Who's trying to smother you out? And what the Five of Wands wants to remind you is that we get very rigid, we get very defensive, we get very locked in when we feel ourselves challenged. And the Five of Wands wants to remind you that challenge is not a bad thing. The challenge it can be really fun actually, right? This is the card. I've told you guys this before, but one of my favorite writers on the Minor Arcana said this is the card of the NBA. This is the card of professional sports. This is the card of the Olympic athlete. Like we get on the field and we give it our all and we challenge each other. We are pushed by each other's experience, by each other's performance. And so the 5 of Wands is a reminder that there is challenge in the world that is a good thing. This is the card of training for a marathon, or this is the card of, trying to get that like 10th pull up. Whatever the thing is, like that fire in you that's like, I am more than I am today, and I can take myself to the edge and I can keep going. So it's a really beautiful energy, but it almost always, when it shows up, almost always indicates that you're being disempowered by taking things too seriously. There's a whisper of devil energy here. So it's a sense of, I mean, in our political landscape right now, you can see this. There are places where people really do have to fight for their right to exist. That's very, very real. And there are also places where the rhetoric and the dialogue and the chaos feels like it's life or death. And I had a girlfriend send me something that she was so upset about, and she had a right to be upset about it, but underneath the noise about it, there was no authority. And it reminded me, I put this thing on TikTok and Instagram. That thing that happened in the Office, the Oval Olive, the Oval Office, there really is an interesting thing. Did you get confused because there were so many loud men in that room that was that performance, that display of noise was not the same thing as power. It's just not. And, the arc of history is long. We will see how that all plays out. I pray for peace. I pray for allyship and support. Like, I pray that this brings the best of America to the forefront. And I do believe that what happened in that room was actually it was almost like a surreal play, or like an absurd performance that was so hyper characterized that you couldn't help but notice the distinction between the Ukrainian president in the room and the American politicians in that room. And just the distance and all the noise and all the bullying and all the kind of harassment and just literally like a saber rattling, isn't that what they say? And then this man who is very dedicated and very clear about what his work is. There might be things about this I don't know. So, like, forgive me if I'm saying something that doesn't, resonate with you, but can you hear what I'm saying about the display of that moment and then the actual authority, the actual truth, the actual repercussions of that moment not being the same thing? That's a great 5 of wands moment, because watching that, your heart hurts. You think this is, I mean, I know people who said to me that that was completely re-traumatizing, right? Completely activated some very deep wounds I have in my body. Now that's real. And then there's also people who just didn't like it and could sense that there was something very wrong, very out of balance, very unjust about that. And yet, what is the authority underneath it? Like, what's happening underneath it? Again, like, how does it echo across time? How does it follow the arc of forward momentum? What is the trajectory that gets set in place by these two choices in behavior, these two choices in being, these two choices in reactivity or in presence? There was a lot of chaos in that room. But what really happened? That's what the 5 of wands is kind of highlighting. It's like there's gonna be noise and challenge, and you're gonna be pushed to your limit. Notice when that's really revealing danger, when that's really revealing a choice to be made, when that's really calling you onto the field, and when that's just noise for noise sake. It's also asking you, like, similarly, to really understand what is the domain that you are operating within, and notice, like, when you're on and off the field. Like, just notice the change in behavior when you're in one mode, you're in a competitor mode, and then when you step off the field. The example would be two lawyers in a courtroom would be another example of this. Opposite sides going at it, but when they leave the courtroom, they can see each other as colleagues, they can see each other as human beings. It's a really important reminder. This is a card of dialoguing and group activity and the collective and community. So it's just an important notice, like, where do you get so fired up? Where do you see red? Where can you not see the human underneath the conversation, underneath the dialogue, underneath the game? And don't let yourself be disempowered by that. So Sometimes we want clean competition. Sometimes we want to play and be challenged. Sometimes we think that something is much more serious than it really is. And sometimes we need to fight for our rights. Like sometimes it is serious. Sometimes our rights are being impacted and we need to stand up, or rights of people that we feel called to protect are being impacted. And we need to stand up and have that fire, have that fight. But really, really, really important to remember this is just a moment. Even the most intense interactions, it's just a moment. Don't lose the forest for the trees. There's something about this where it's like you just kind of get caught up in something. And the 5 of Wands would always encourage you to just take it a little less seriously. Like when you find yourself really in that heightened state, what do you need to do to bring it back down? How do you need to drop back into your body? There's a lot of fire in the 5 of Wands, which again can be playful and fun and exciting and sexy. And there's a lot of fire in the 5 of Wands, so there's also a call to ground, settle for a moment, counterbalance, set yourself up to really see things from different perspectives, which brings our Hangman energy. When we have a Hangman environment and we have an Empress environment and we get the 5 of Wands, we're kind of thinking about, okay, how could I look at this differently? How could this be an opportunity for growth? Where does this thing that feels like it's do or die really just a tunnel, really just a challenge, really just a portal into something new? That's really where the 5 of Wands is shining. 5 of Swords is the game. It means there's like winners and losers and life is tough. The 5 of Wands is a game. And so we just want to kind of distinguish the sense of seriousness, the sense of needing to really cut each other versus what are we trying to work out together as a community. And really, it really behooves you in a 5 of Wands week to remember your own humanity, your own heart. Remember the basic lesson that even the things you do that seem kind of crazy, they spring from some need. There's some intention, something you're trying to get met there that's actually positive, that's actually meant to sustain you. You might not always behave the right way, but the intention is pure. And this is the hard part, the same is true for all other people. The same is true for all other people. People behave in crazy ways, but underneath it, we really are young and tender and afraid and vulnerable. And we really are trying to protect that truth. So 5 of Wands, just remember to keep it light. Don't get yourself into lockdown, drag out fights. Move your body. So sex is great, physical exertion is great, competition is great. Being out in nature, hiking is great. You really want to think about moving the energy through your body. And this came up, this week as well. One woman asked me, "What do I do when I feel really frozen?" I really want to remind you that freeze is totally normal and also not in your best interest. And so when you feel yourself in that frozen place, really be clear, what do you need to get back to groundedness? What do you need to get back to full breath? And usually there's when it's freeze, it's an overwhelm, and forcing ourselves to move when we're ready is sometimes we have to curl up and collapse, and that's fair. But when we feel that kind of tip over into indulgence or tip over into a real kind of codified freeze, we want to almost force ourselves to move. We want to force ourselves to take a walk, to do some yoga, to do some stretching, to dance, to listen to some music, to garden. We want to create. We want to kind of force ourselves to move past the freeze into some type of creativity, some type of motion. So I hope that helps you navigate this week ahead. And I send lots of love. Everything to really report. Working on the membership community. I hope you'll join me there. We'll be doing things like exploring the energy of the Empress and how it lives in our bodies and how we can kind of open up to her or soften or work with any shadow that arises when we think of the Empress. And shaman school's on the agenda. And yeah, a couple other little things, but that's it for now. Sending you so much love and really helping you, hoping and helping and hoping and helping and honoring that we can be a little lighter with the things that challenge us this week. We can hold it all a little more lightly this week, and that will serve you and it will probably serve every other member of your community. All the best to you and happy March, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.